Good morning, everyone. It's Dr. Arlene Diamco, the Multidimensional MD. My mission is to help bring the intuitive aspects of health back to medicine in practical and tangible ways so that you can access greater peace, joy, and connection in your everyday life. Today, I would like to talk about social anxiety because this is something that I've seen risen in since the pandemic, since the last few years when there's been so much stress and anxiety in general. And I'm just seeing it in all different ages and kids and adults. And and part of the reason I want to talk about it is because I also remember growing up when I had periods of social anxiety in elementary school and middle school and high school, and it wasn't all the time, but there were times where maybe I felt more down or more anxious, and I could tell that there was something that was really bothering me, and I couldn't do simple tasks like asking somebody if I could borrow a pen or a piece of paper or raising my hand in class. And so I wanted to talk about like how you could deal with that and what social anxiety is, what it looks like, what are the signs and symptoms, what it feels like, ways you can deal with it and move through it. So physical ways you can move through it, mind body ways you can move through it, and also spiritual and energetic ways you can move through it, because as always, this is about multidimensional health. And if before we get started, if you haven't already liked or subscribed, you can please do that. You can comment, let me know where you're from. I always love to hear from you. If you have any questions on anything I'm talking about, then please leave a comment and ask, and I'll see if I can answer it for you. So first of all, what is social anxiety? Well, it is a kind of stress and anxiety, and it can impact your health on many layers. There's a spectrum of social anxiety. So it can range from being shy or just being more nervous about doing new things, but that may not necessarily stop you from doing things that you hope to do. And it can move into social anxiety disorder, which is much more intense. You can also have social anxiety and not necessarily be shy. So some people have like this mixed introversion, extroversion, and they're not necessarily shy, but they get nervous in situations, maybe in classroom settings or at work. You could have a mix of all of these. So you could be more introverted, you could be more shy, you could have social anxiety, or you could have more social anxiety disorder. According to the National Institute of Health, social anxiety disorder is an intense, persistent fear of being watched and judged by others. And this fear can affect work, school, and other daily activities. It can even make it hard to make and keep friends. So that's from the NIH. It's normal to have some social anxiety, but if it starts to interfere with your regular activities, that's when psychologists start to call it excessive or more intense, or that's where they label it a disorder. And what else does that look like? It's this fear of being humiliated, rejected. It could be a performance anxiety. It's a type of social anxiety. I see this actually really commonly in both kids and adults. So that could be with competing in a sports game. It could be in public speaking, not necessarily in really big groups, but even in just in work settings and school settings, raising your hand in class, having to give a presentation, or performing on stage, whether acting or music or anything on stage. It could look like extreme shyness, again, that I was talking about. And then from a multidimensional perspective, it's a lack of confidence and trust in your true self. So it's forgetting your true self. And this is, I did a whole other podcast on your true self and what that feels like and looks like. So you can check that out. It's in your true self is that you are this divine being of light and love. So please check out my prior episode on that because that's really important. So what other signs and symptoms of social anxiety are there? Well, there's this sense of panic or feelings of nervousness. Your fight, flight, or freeze mechanism kicks in. So depending on where you are in one of those like stress responses, you could be sweating, trembling, your heart could be pounding, you could feel lightheaded or dizzy, like that kind of numbing or dissociating feeling. You could get butterflies in your stomach or feel nauseated. You could have tension in your body. So you could get tension headaches. You could have tension in your neck or shoulders. You may not want to make eye contact with people, and you might avoid people altogether or avoid certain situations. You could have excessive worry prior to social situations, and then you could be thinking about them afterwards, what you did, what people said to you, and just be looping negative self critical thoughts. Some people will cope with social anxiety with drinking beforehand or even taking drugs. And before talking to people or before social situations, or just getting the habit of doing that in general. And there can be signs, more subtle signs of social anxiety. So that could be looking at your phone constantly so you don't have to talk to other people, staying really busy. So if you're at a party, just helping clean up or put things out so you don't have to interact with people as much. And some of these things are very normal. So I mean, if you think about like when you go in an elevator, everybody you're supposed to do certain things, right? You go in, you face forward, and then sometimes there will be some back and forth, but a lot of times people will just look at their phone, or if you're in the subway or the bus. When I lived in New York, that was a really common thing to do. The bus could be, the subway could be completely crowded, but it would be so quiet. And that's not necessarily like social anxiety, but it could be. It could look like that. It was just sort of like this cultural norm. So we'll talk about that in a little bit more. So what causes social anxiety? Well, the interesting thing is, per the National Institute of Health, they don't really know. Um, but if we look from a more multidimensional perspective, and fortunately, more people are doing this, and more psychologists and therapists are looking at things from a more holistic perspective, because you can see how social anxiety can develop over a lifetime. First, there can be genetic tendencies. So it can run in your family, or there could just be certain personality tendencies, or what I call constitutional tendencies. Again, you could be more introverted, but introverted doesn't mean you're socially anxious. It can just mean that you prefer to spend time on your own. But then if you're made to go in certain situations and you don't want to, then that can create social anxiety. Your early life experiences also can uh, determine like how you respond to certain situations later in life. And looking back, like I can see that for myself, because I remember in kindergarten, I moved to a new school and having a really hard time, and certain kids making fun of me for the way I looked. They made fun of my nose because it was smaller than most of all the other kids. And then I remember how that carried through elementary school, and even through middle school, high school, of feeling a little bit more awkward, or feeling like I didn't belong, or feeling like I looked different. Not all the time, but depending on the circumstances. And so then that's an example of how past or current unprocessed stress or trauma can create certain patterns in your subconscious, in your nervous system, that if they're not processed, it sticks. So the holistic psychologist, Dr. Nicole LaPerla, she calls social anxiety nervous system hypervigilance. So you are on this high alert. You're in this fight, flight, or freeze state, and your body is responding as if there is a threat, because you're in a prior situation where there was a threat. You were embarrassed, you're humiliated, you were made fun of. And it could be like a small situation like that, or it could be a bigger one. So then you get stuck in this fight or flight or freeze state, or situations that remind you of that past stressful situation will trigger this fight, flight, or freeze response. So it may not make sense to you. And I've seen this happen to adults too. And they're like, I don't know why I'm like this. I've given presentations at work so many different times, and I still get really nervous about it, where maybe a day or two before they start ruminating about it, just worrying and worrying about whatever they have to say. And they're really good at what they do. So there's no reason from the present situation for them to have that worry. But then we would kind of like scan through the lifetime and look at, was there another situation in your early on in your life where you felt a similar emotion, a similar feeling, where it's like, oh, had so much worry about talking to people, or you felt embarrassed, or you're afraid that you're going to be judged or people are going to make fun of you. And so, for example, this one man I was talking to, a businessman, he remembered a situation where he moved schools and he had to give a presentation, and it didn't go how he wanted it to, because he was new to the school. He didn't know all the instructions. He didn't know what you were supposed to wear or were supposed to bring. So one, he didn't do well on the presentation. And two, some of the other kids were laughing at him. And so that kind of like ingrained in him this response, like if he had to go in a situation where he had to give a presentation, it would create a lot of this nervousness. So after we identified like what one of the situations that created it, like created that subconscious stress pattern, then we could start to address it. So you don't have to worry when you come up with, how did that get stuck in me, or what in my past like developed that in me. Don't worry. Once you can see it, then there are ways that you can start to address it. And so we're going to go through that. And this is what I love to help people go through. Other causes of social anxiety can be generational trauma too. So sometimes it feels bigger than you, because it is, and that's okay. And this is something that we are working through as a society and cultural in general. And last, there are cultural expectations. So I remember when I was visiting the Philippines, where my family is from, then I was in college, and we went to this nightclub. It was actually Hard Rock Cafe, and it was amazing, because they had this huge wooden dance floor and this incredible live band. And the interesting thing was, the place was packed, but only on the outside, because the dance floor, which was the majority of the room, was completely empty. And I was asking my cousin, I was like, what's going on? Why is the dance floor empty? And this place is so packed, like you were shoulder to shoulder walking with people. And, it was so crowded. Like my siblings and I, we wanted to move into this empty space. And she explained that, oh, this is how it is. It's a different culture. It's not like you Americans, people from the United States, are a little bit more outwardly acting. We're a little more like she was explaining, more inward. So it just takes people a little while to warm up. So I don't know, maybe that's a whole like social culture, cultural social anxiety, but it's also a cultural norm. So you could look at it, depends on how you look at it. But anyway, my siblings and I, we decided that we would move into that space, because it just felt so good to be in empty space and not so crowded. So I guess we got to break the dance floor that night. So now I'm going to go through ways to help move through social anxiety. So we're going to go through physical ways, then mind-body approaches, and energetic and spiritual approaches. So how to move through social anxiety? Well, physical ways are a reminder to check with your basic needs. Are you hungry? Are you tired? Do you need something to drink? Do you need to rest? Do you need to take a break? So if those things are not met, then go ahead and meet those, because it's much more difficult to deal with a situation that's challenging for you if your basic needs are not met. Also consider decreasing caffeine. Caffeine is a central nervous system stimulant, and it is known to increase tension and anxiety and feelings of panic. I would also consider decreasing alcohol if you drink any alcohol. Alcohol on the other hand, is a central nervous system depressant. So that's why it helps people feel more relaxed. However, if you're relying on alcohol to interact in social situations, it can become a crutch. So you never really learn to be yourself without it. And then, of course, over drinking and binge drinking can have its own set of issues. And we go through mind body approaches. There are so many ways you can approach social anxiety with mind body exercises and even simple things. So the first is just mindful listening. So you're in the flow of the moment instead of focusing on what other people are thinking of you. So when you're mindful listening, you are mindfully present. So this means start paying attention to your different senses. What do you see instead of like thinking about like the negative thoughts circulating or how people are judging you? Look around and just notice the colors of things, the shapes of things. Feel your feet on the ground. That helps to ground you. Just see what sounds are around you. Maybe some music, maybe the wind blowing, people talking, or the sounds of people eating. What do you smell? So if you're at a party, you might smell a certain food, or if you're outside, you could smell the fresh air, uh, and and then listen with that mindful presence to what someone is saying to you. So focus on the words that are coming to you instead of constantly thinking of like how you feel about them or what they're thinking of you. Chances are they're not thinking of you as like in that negative way that you're ruminating in your mind. Um, and let yourself be curious and let that curiosity fuel that mindful presence because being curious helps to widen your perspective. So when you're feeling anxious, often you have tunnel vision and you have a very narrow perspective. Everyone's looking at me like this. I don't look good. I don't. I'm not normal. I don't. Just all these negative thoughts of what you don't like about yourself or being self-critical. When you are curious about the situation, like, oh, I wonder what this party is going to be like. I wonder what the food's going to taste like. I wonder who's going to be there. Um, I wonder, if I could say hi to like three people. Just being curious, widen your perspective, and let that give yourself momentum to flow through the situation. You can also use some breath work. So, one simple breathing exercise you could do is called the space between, which I love. So, you can pick a count, like 5 count or 7 count, and breathe in for those 5 or 7 seconds. And then at the top of the breath, just linger there a bit longer. So, you're focusing on the space between breaths. So just stay there, say like 7 counts, and then breathe out again for 7 counts. And at the bottom of the breath, linger there again. So it's this potential space between things, and that space between is like settling into the stillness or the void, and this is where all things are created, all things emerge. And so as you let yourself like settle into that stillness, then it's calming for your nervous system, and it takes your mind off of these worry thoughts. So sitting in that space between breaths. So pausing at the top of the breath and pausing at the bottom of the breath. If you wanted to try it, just like breathing in for 7 counts. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Pause for 7 counts. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then exhale for 7 counts. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then pause at the bottom of the breath for 7 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And even the counting is sort of feels like counting sheep, so it takes your mind off of any looping thoughts. You can also use this butterfly hugs, which is a combination of a cross-lateral exercise, meaning it crosses the midline, so it helps to integrate right and left sides of the brain. So if you have these looping negative thoughts, then it can help to smooth them out. So this butterfly hug was a method developed by Lucina Artigas during her work with survivors from Hurricane Pauline in Mexico in 1998. And she was an EMDR therapist. So you butterfly hugs, you just cross your arms like this, and you can move them back and forth like this. And you can notice your senses like while you're doing this to help ground yourself, just like we talked about before, just noticing your senses. And this can doing this for even like 2 minutes can help to calm your nervous system, to help more fluid thoughts, to help with coordination, helps with so many different things. And if you, I'm just going to mention a few other things that you could do is the EFT, emotional freedom technique, or tapping exercises, tension and trauma release exercises, which we teach in my office. And just practice taking these small steps, gentle steps every day. Because when there's something that's difficult for you and challenging for you, then just practicing in ways that don't overwhelm you. Because if you pushed it too much past your point of comfort, then it can start to be counterproductive. And my kids will talk openly about social anxiety being a normal response. And they'll practice too at the different ages, like whatever is appropriate for them. So when they're little, or they can start to practice ordering food when we're sitting at a restaurant. And when they get a little bit older, maybe they'll practice saying ordering something on the phone. And then when they're older, maybe they'll get a job and work at the ice cream store or work at a restaurant or some other kind of shop. And so you get to practice like using these skills. And of course, they're practicing at school too, but to practice in different situations because you might not have social anxieties in certain situations, certain circumstances, and have it in other areas. And it's a matter of getting used to as well. So that moves us through to the spiritual and energetic approaches to help move you through social anxiety. And just briefly, this can start with being kind. So if you don't know what to do, just start with being kind. So be kind to yourself, be kind to other people. You can just say something nice to them, and but something that's authentic. So something that you mean. And when you have something like positive that you think about someone else, like I always think like instead of keeping it to yourself, why not share it with them? Because it's so beautiful to be able to hear something kind that someone thinks of you. And so that can help break your social anxiety or like move through it. And then when you see that their response to it, how usually when if you say something nice to someone, it just makes them feel so good and they feel really warm. And you never know what kind of impact it can have on their day. It can have these ripple effects throughout their day. So um, there's always okay to be kind. And then to have a mantra to help you kind of settle into your true self and who you are. And you could combine this with the butterfly hugs. You could simply say an I am mantra. I am love. I am kind. I am a light being. Because when you say this and you realize that's who you are, one, it doesn't feel like you need to be anxious. And two, if you are, it's also okay because you still are love, you still are kind, and you're still a light being. So you're okay with yourself no matter what. And you could also do this while going out in nature, because when you look at nature, nature doesn't feel embarrassed for herself. Nature is not worried about being judged. One tree next to another tree, one flower next to another flower. Nature doesn't have that kind of competition. Nature is beautiful because of all the variations you see, the different landscapes, the different flowers next to each other, the different trees, the different seasons. So when you think about it that way, then it makes it easier to be yourself because you are a part of nature. And if you still need some help, then go get some help. I'm here for you. I would be happy to help you. You can see a therapist that's familiar with some of the therapies I mentioned above: tension, trauma release, emotional freedom technique. There are many others. Um, there's counselors and life coaches will use various therapies to help you and make sure that they're used to talking about social anxiety and helping people through that. And I would be happy to help you as well with the cranial osteopathic treatments, with herbals, with mind body approaches, with homeopathic remedies, with learning who you are and tapping into your true self, your intuition, your constant guidance that is always there, so that you can feel at ease with yourself more in your everyday life and feel more connected with who you are, so that you can live with ease and feel more joy and peace in your everyday life. So I hope that helped you in some way. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Feel free to connect with me on Instagram at All Worlds Health, on Facebook, All Worlds Health and Pediatrics. You can sign up for my e-love letters. I send them out once a week on Wednesdays, and you can do that on my website, allworldshealth.com. And please like and subscribe. Let me know if there's anything you'd like me to talk about, and I'll see if I can do that. So have a beautiful rest of your week. I believe in you, so I hope that you believe in you too. And I'll see you next week. Bye for now.